Imagine you just spent, I don't know, like 3 solid hours ruthlessly dominating a game of Monopoly.
Oh, that is the best feeling.
Right. I mean, you have completely bankrupted your friends.
Oh, yeah.
You've got those little red hotels stacked high all over Boardwalk, Park Place. You are just sitting there feeling like an absolute titan of industry.
Just counting all that colorful paper money.
Exactly. But what happens the exact second the game ends?
Right.
All your fake wealth, your properties, that massive leverage you had, it all goes right back into a cardboard box.
Right back in the box.
Instantly.
Right.
And today, we are actually looking at a sermon that uses that exact brutal reality check to explain why a 2,000-year-old message about community is the absolutely only logical investment for your life.
It is a profoundly jarring way to start a theological discussion.
Yeah, it really is.
But, I mean, it is incredibly effective. Because what we're exploring today is this progression of thought that it just completely deconstructs how human beings naturally organize themselves in society.
Yeah.
We're looking at a community built on a foundation that fundamentally defies every evolutionary survival instinct we possess.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you're listening to this right now, we are going really deep into today's sermon. And I love that it beautifully bridges both English and Korean insights.
Yes, that dynamic is so good.
It's great. We are specifically looking at the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 18 and 20. And the core mission of our deep dive today is to explore Jesus's radical definition of the word church.
Right, the ecclesia.
The ecclesia.
Yeah.
So we are not talking about, a brick and mortar building with a steeple or some kind of social club. We're talking about a revolutionary kingdom community.
Exactly.
But, I mean, tackling a concept this massive is intimidating. So where does the sermon actually ground this idea? Where do we start?
Well, it grounds it in absolute certainty.
Sure.
To understand why the specific type of community is necessary at all, we have to understand the sermon's baseline argument about human existence. What actually matters before we hit the inevitable finish line.
Right, the box.
The box, yes. The sermon uses the fleeting nature of our daily lives, that Monopoly board, to establish why an eternal community is the only logical place to invest our energy.
Yeah.
Think about the person who spent the entire game aggressively hoarding the board, just destroying their friendships over plastic houses.
And ruining Thanksgiving.
Exactly, ruining the holiday. But they are actually the most pitiful person in the room because tomorrow, everyone else has completely forgotten about the game.
It hits so close to home. Because we do this in real life every single day.
We really do.
We fiercely negotiate our salaries, we buy our literal houses, we hoard our 401ks, and we act as if the board game is, eternal.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly mirrors the Beatitudes from Matthew chapter 5.
Oh, right.
For context, the Beatitudes are that really famous teaching where Jesus sits on a hillside and just completely flips the script on what a successful life looks like.
Right, telling the crowds that the poor in spirit and the mourning are blessed.
Exactly. He's telling them that the poor in spirit, the mourning, the persecuted are the ones who are truly blessed. Which sounds crazy to us.
It really does.
Because worldly uncertainties, our health, our financial stability, our career trajectories, they fluctuate constantly. They make terrible foundational structure.
Because they're plastic houses.
Because they're plastic houses. The sermon points out there are really only 2 absolute certainties in this life. The first is that physical death is 100% guaranteed.
Yeah.
And the second is that it simply hasn't happened to us yet.
Man, that is a very sobering thought.
Yeah.
But it radically reframes how we define a blessed life. I mean, if the cardboard box is waiting for all of us at the end of the game, then facing hardship isn't necessarily a failure.
Precisely. In the context of the box being poor in spirit or mourning, those aren't curses. They're vital blessings.
Wow.
Why? Because those hardships actively prevent us from falling in love with the plastic Monopoly houses.
Right, they break the illusion.
They completely shatter the illusion of permanence. They force us to crave eternal realities, the kingdom of heaven, rather than temporary worldly success. The pain acts as this necessary alarm clock, just waking us up to the fact that our true citizenship lies elsewhere.
I love how that grounds the theology in something so visceral. But, listening to this, I find myself questioning how modern people actually apply this.
Sure.
Because the sermon heavily critiques the idea of isolation. And it brings up this brilliant detail about learning to make kimchi on YouTube.
Oh, I love this part.
It's so good. If I sit in my living room and I watch 100 high-definition kimchi tutorials, I might be able to recite the exact ratio of cabbage to garlic to gochujang.
Right, the spicy Korean chili powder?
Yeah, the stuff that gives it the real kick. I might think I am a total culinary expert, but I haven't tasted a single thing.
Not a bite.
I haven't physically chopped the vegetables.
Yeah.
I haven't felt the sting of the spices on my hands or smelled it fermenting. So how does this sermon connect that kind of like virtual learning to the way modern people approach faith?
That is a phenomenal question because it really strikes at the core of the modern human condition. The concept of a lone believer, it simply does not exist in the framework of today's sermon.
It just doesn't.
No. You can consume all the theology discussions and YouTube sermons you want, but without action, it is entirely theoretical.
Right.
The sermon uses another excellent culinary metaphor. Just because you go to a Mexican restaurant once a week does not make you Mexican.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In the exact same way, simply sitting in a pew or, watching a live stream does not automatically make you a Christian. You absolutely need personal obedience and participation.
So passive consumption is like the enemy of actual transformation.
Yes. But the inverse is equally dangerous.
How so?
Well, if you completely avoid the restaurant, if you avoid the physical community entirely, you never actually experience the reality of the faith.
Oh, I see.
We are fundamentally social beings. The sermon argues that our true abilities, our genuine wisdom, and honestly, our deepest character flaws, they do not reveal themselves when we're sitting alone in our perfectly controlled living rooms.
Yeah, because nobody is there to annoy us.
Exactly. They only appear when we physically bump into each other in a community. You do not know how patient you are until someone deeply, deeply annoys you. Friction is required for growth.
Wow. Okay, if friction is the only way we actually grow, then the traditional way we gather, sitting quietly in rows looking at the back of someone's head, that makes no sense.
It makes zero sense.
Jesus knew this, which is why his blueprint for this community was so jarring to the people of his day. The sermon dives into the historical shock of the word ecclesia.
Yeah, the historical shock value of Matthew chapter 16 cannot be overstated here. When Jesus says, "I will build my church," using that Greek word ekklesia, he was doing something unprecedented.
Because it wasn't just a new synagogue.
Right. He was not simply taking the old Jewish community, which, was fundamentally based on the Torah, the ancient Jewish law.
Right.
Law that detailed strict rules for daily living, dividing the clean from the unclean, strictly separating Jew from Gentile. He wasn't just giving that a minor renovation.
He was completely tearing up the floorboard.
He really was. He was starting an entirely new gathering based on one single unifying factor, and that was the confession of Jesus as the Christ, the anointed king.
Just that one thing.
Just that. In a first-century society strictly divided by ancient laws and severe purity codes, bringing people together based solely on this shared allegiance, it was a paradigm shift of massive proportions.
Would have been scandalous.
It was social suicide for a devout Jew to break bread with a Gentile. Yet here was this new Israel functioning under a completely new set of rules.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. Those new rules introduce the concept of the inverted pyramid from Matthew chapter 20.
Yes.
In the standard worldly pyramid, the one every single corporation and government uses, the rulers, the kings, the CEOs, they sit at the very top.
Always.
They wield the power, and their weight crushes the people beneath them. But Jesus literally takes that pyramid and flicks it completely upside down.
Right.
In this new kingdom community, the king is positioned at the very bottom, bearing the immense weight of absolutely everyone else. Above the king are the apostles, then the disciples, and finally, the vast crowds and the marginalized are resting at the wide, expansive top.
It's a beautiful image.
It is, but wait, I'm actually stuck here.
Okay.
Because if literally everyone in the ecclesia is racing to the bottom of the inverted pyramid to serve, who is actually steering the ship? It sounds like a recipe for total organizational chaos.
Yeah.
If you run a business like that, you go bankrupt in a week.
Oh, absolutely. It would be a complete chaos if it were a corporation. But here's the mechanism of how it works in the kingdom. It requires a radical transformation of the human mind.
Okay, how?
Well, this raises an important question, right? How did Jesus enforce this bizarre structure?
Yep.
We see the answer in his incredibly harsh interaction with Peter.
Oh, right.
Moments after Peter confesses Jesus as the Christ, Jesus explains that the mechanism of this new kingdom is his own suffering and death.
Which Peter hates.
Right, because that is the ultimate act of moving to the bottom of the inverted pyramid, and Peter immediately rebukes him because Peter expects a worldly pyramid. He wants a king who conquers Rome Rome with a sword, not a king who gets crushed on a cross.
And Jesus turns around and calls Peter Satan.
Yeah.
I mean, that is not just a gentle correction. That is a violent shattering of Peter's entire worldview.
It was absolute shock therapy. Jesus had to violently correct Peter because this new kingdom operates exclusively on sacrifice. If the foundational leaders of this new community believed they were building a traditional power structure, the entire enterprise would collapse into just another corrupt, worldly institution.
Another corporation.
Exactly. The DNA of the ecclesia is fundamentally incompatible with self-promotion. Jesus bearing the cross is the literal mechanism that allows the pyramid to stay inverted without collapsing, and every leader is called to replicate that exact mechanism.
Yeah. If you are listening to this right now and you hold any kind of leadership title at work or, in your community, this next part is going to challenge exactly how you view your job.
Oh, definitely.
Because today's sermon takes an incredibly sharp critique of the fixer mentality in modern leadership. The trap of titles.
It is the most dangerous trap in any religious or social organization. The sermon explicitly warns about the mindset of church leadership.
Yeah.
When someone is given a title, whether it is pastor, elder, or even just, a small group leader, the most toxic thought that can enter their mind is, I'm going to fix this church, or I am going to fix these broken people.
Because that is worldly pyramid thinking. That is stepping onto the top of the pyramid, looking down at the peasants, and deciding you know best.
Precisely. That is exercising authority in the exact manner of the Gentile rulers Jesus warned about. You're trying to assert dominance to create order.
Right.
In the kingdom, titles exist only as a strict mandate to lower yourself. Serving the community is not a strategic career move. It is not a power grab masked in religious language.
Wow.
It is actively taking the heat, resolving conflict without asserting dominance, and just absorbing the cost. It is a cross to bear.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting.
Well, what's fascinating here is how the sermon frames that exact experience of exhaustion. If you are a leader and you find yourself constantly forced to be poor in spirit, if you are forced to be meek, if you are utterly exhausted from trying to be a peacemaker among incredibly difficult people.
Which happens a lot.
All the time. You might look at your life and think you are failing as a leader, but the sermon argues you are actually doing it perfectly right.
Wait, really?
Yeah. You are feeling the crushing gravitational weight of the inverted pyramid. You are standing exactly where Jesus stood.
That reframing is incredible. If you are exhausted from genuinely serving, you are not doing it wrong. You are just experiencing gravity in an upside-down world.
Exactly.
So, okay, if the entire community is built on this grueling upside-down sacrifice, we have to ask about scale. Like, how small can this community be and still actually function?
Right.
The sermon answers this by diving into the deep end of theology, what it calls the literal math of love.
Yes, this comes from the deep dive into the specific wording, the exegesis, of Matthew chapter 18, verse 20. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I among them.
Right.
It is a famous verse, often quoted just to validate, sparsely attended prayer meetings. But the sermon unpacks the specific numbers Jesus uses, the exact math of 2 and 3.
Let's start with the 2. Why did Jesus say 2? The sermon lays out this brilliant, just undeniable logic. 2 is the absolute minimum number required to express love. You cannot genuinely sacrifice for yourself. Serving yourself is just self-preservation, which is biologically hardwired into us. Love, by its very definition in this kingdom, it requires a recipient.
Yes, it does.
It requires an action directed outward toward another living, breathing human being. You need a minimum of 2 people to spark the friction of genuine sacrifice.
Exactly. One person sitting alone in a room can study theology until they have memorized the entire Bible, but one person alone cannot actively participate in the foundational ethic of the kingdom, which is self-giving love.
You just can't.
But then Jesus adds, or 3, why did he add the third person? Well, in ancient Jewish law, specifically in Deuteronomy, it required 2 witnesses plus the accused to establish a legally binding truth in court. That makes 3.
But the sermon takes it way beyond just that legal context and moves it into a deeply relational dynamic.
It does, and this is where the genius of the text really shines. Relationally speaking, 3 is the absolute minimum number required to share and overflow love.
Okay, explain that.
Think about the dynamics of a couple. 2 people can love each other deeply, but that love can easily remain exclusive, closed off, insular.
Right, like an us against the world thing.
Exactly. It can become this private, comfortable club of 2 that completely ignores the outside world. But the moment a third person is introduced into the dynamic, it disrupts the comfort.
Yeah, it changes everything.
It forces the love between the first two to spill over, to expand, and to be shared. The third person is the necessary catalyst for overflowing grace.
This blew my mind
Mm.
because the sermon scales this mathematical concept all the way up to the very nature of God himself. It builds to this Trinitarian climax.
Yes.
Let's walk through the logic. If God were a single, solitary entity dwelling in the cosmos before creation, he would have actually needed to create humans just to have an object to love.
Right.
He would have needed us to experience the concept of love, which means God was somehow incomplete on his own.
Which completely contradicts the fundamental perfection of the divine. If God needs creation to actualize his own character, then God is dependent on us. But because God is a Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, 3 in 1, he is already and has always been a complete, perfect ecosystem of expressed and shared love.
Wow.
The Father loves the Son loves the Father, and that love eternally overflows in the Spirit. The minimum requirement for overflowing love is eternally met within the very nature of God long before the universe ever existed.
That was a massive aha moment for me. God did not create humanity because he was lonely in the dark.
No.
He didn't create us out of a deficit. He created us out of a sheer overflow of joy. He invited us, essentially, to be the fourth person at the table of an already perfect, eternal love dynamic.
It's beautiful.
It entirely shatters human pride. We are not the necessary center of the universe. God didn't need us to validate his existence. Yet in this incredibly gracious, staggering act, we are invited to pull up a chair to a table that was already full.
It is a deeply humbling realization. It removes any sense of entitlement we might bring into our faith or our leadership. When we realize that we are just graciously invited guests, it changes exactly how we interact with everyone else at the table.
Yeah.
We are not the hosts controlling the guest list. We are the recipients of an overflowing hospitality. And that realization, it just must dictate our actions on a highly practical level.
Which perfectly grounds all of this incredibly lofty, mind-bending theology back into the reality of like a Tuesday morning commute or a frustrating interaction with a coworker. So how does the sermon conclude this entire argument?
Well, the sermon is very careful not to leave us floating in the clouds of abstract Trinitarian theology. It concludes with a final, urgent plea.
Okay.
The ultimate goal of the church, the ecclesia, is not to sit in a tight circle and debate high-level philosophy. The goal is to be a community that takes the invisible God and makes him visible and tangible to a broken world through actual physical care.
It is the incarnation continued.
Exactly. Just as Jesus didn't simply shout, I love you from the heavens, but actually came down in the flesh, subjected himself to the friction of human life, and physically died on a cross, the kingdom community must operate the exact same way.
Wow.
Love cannot remain a theoretical concept or a nice feeling. It must translate into physical action, into financial generosity, into the giving of our time, and into genuine, uncomfortable sacrifice for the people sitting right next to us.
So what does this all mean? We started by talking about a board game and the terrifying reality that one day all of our worldly achievements, our bank accounts, our titles, they're all getting swept right back into the cardboard box.
Right back in the box.
The only thing that escapes the box is the eternal community, the kingdom.
And that kingdom is built on the inverted pyramid.
Yeah.
It is built by those willing to race to the bottom, to bear the weight of others, just practicing the literal math of love.
Here's a final thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. The sermon asks us to look at the people in our physical gatherings not as a crowd to endure, but as our essential partners in this math of love.
Right.
But let's push that even further into the reality we live in today. In an era where we can increasingly simulate community through artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and digital avatars,
Yeah.
can a digital entity ever serve as that third person in the math of love?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Or does true kingdom love strictly require the physical, messy, exhausting friction of another human body sitting across the table from you? If you are the fourth person invited to the Trinity's perfect table, maybe the fifth person you need to pull up a chair for today can't be found on a screen. Think about who that person in your physical life is right now.